Welcome to French Guiana. The carnival here is over. It's time to get back to business. Time for another Ariane space launch. Night has just fallen. A few moments ago, in fact. It's nearing 7:10 here at the European spaceport, and we're 28 minutes away from the liftoff of Ariane Flight 106 carrying Hotbird 4. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Martin Ransom, and with me,
Rémi Cochet. Good evening, everybody.
We're talking to you from Jupiter 2 Mission Control, situated some 12 kilometers from the launch zone. Here we find not only the operational teams behind the glass window in the control area, but also in the red-carpeted section, the VIP section, our guests who've come specially to Kourou for this launch. Our program going out in English and in French. Our video transmission is hopping from satellite to satellite and is being beamed all around the world. We have a launch window today which is pretty long. A window that is 89 minutes long precisely. That's the time in which we have to lift off, starting off at 38 minutes past the hour. Local times now around the world shown on your screen. Our liftoff and flight trajectory will be eastwards from this privileged launch site, allowing the launch not only of geostationary missions as tonight, but also polar or sun-synchronous ones. Perfectly suited to the performance that this mission requires, Ariane Space has chosen the 42P vehicle, an Ariane 4 equipped with 2 solid propellant boosters. The vehicle is composed of the first stage with ignition at liftoff of the 4 Viking engines, together with ignition of the solid boosters. The first and second stages are powered using storable propellants. These stages were fueled yesterday. Towards the summit, we have the third stage, which will be doing most of the work this evening, a cryotechnic engine using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, produced by SEP, division of SNECMA. The vehicle equipment bay, this is the brains of the launcher, which will ensure the correct flight trajectory right to destination, and at the summit, the fairing, produced by our Swiss partners, Oerlikon Contravis. We're using today a short version of our fairing. Everything is proceeding normally, and we can say that because the green panels, they're all green. These are the status panels, Rémi.
Yes, the status panels gives us a precise indication of the status of the entire launch site, including the vehicle and the spacecraft. And as you see, everything is green right now.
Part of the most important status panels, are there more important ones? Weather, for example?
Well, we have technical decision panels and automatic decision panels. That means in the automatic launch sequence, some of them, if necessary, go red automatically. Some other of them, for example, the launch authorization, has to be pushed manually.
And there's also flight safety, which is a paramount consideration.
Yes.
Right, on to our passenger now, the payload under the fairing. Hotbird 4 is based on a Eurostar 2000 Plus platform built for Eutelsat by Matra Marconi Space, with contributions from MMS facilities both in the UK and in France. So hello there to folks in Portsmouth, in Stevenage, and in Toulouse, where the satellite was integrated. This geostationary satellite is bound for the 13 degrees orbital position to beam direct-to-home television, radio, and multimedia services to the whole of Europe. "24 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Still some faint sunlight on the top of the fairing there. Here in Jupiter 2, some of the operational teams, perhaps we can identify the main figures. There are 2 people here in Jupiter 2, the range manager and the mission director.
Yes, the mission director, or the Ariane Space mission director today is Philippe Roland, and he has to coordinate the entire countdown. To do that, he has beside him, this is Philippe Roland, the mission director, and beside him we have Julio Monreal, which is responsible for the entire range preparation for the countdown.
What are they watching closely at this precise point?
Yes, they just had the -25 meteor briefing, and maybe I will try to have the information.
There is a third person involved in this mission, as for every launch, and he is the launch site operations manager. Tonight it's Francis Pellacoeur. He is in the launch control building, which is situated about a kilometer from the pad.
Okay, merci.
And the launch site manager, what are his responsibilities? Here we see him on screen.
This is Francis Pellacoeur. He's in charge of the liftoff tonight. And I just got the last meteor briefing 25 minutes before liftoff. All the parameters are green. No problems tonight.
These people in the launch control building, they're closest to the pad. They're in a fortified, safe building.
Yes, they are in a kind of blockhouse about 1 kilometer away from the vehicle tonight. They are about 150 people, the entire team preparing the vehicle for liftoff.
And these three people are liaising with each other constantly?
Oh yes, they are linked together through a communication loop, and they communicate, of course, very often to be sure that everybody is coordinated at the right moment.
Tonight's mission, Flight 106, the 106th Ariane mission, is the second of the year for Ariane Space. T-22 minutes and counting.
Formed in 1980 as the first industrial and commercial space transportation company in the world, Ariane Space operates the Ariane launch system developed by the French space agency CNES on behalf of the European Space Agency ESA. Ariane Space demonstrates European scientific and technical capabilities and has the backing of the space industry and banks of 13 countries. Ariane Space operates worldwide, with its European headquarters at Évry, just outside Paris in France, a subsidiary in Washington, D.C. in the USA, a branch office in the Asia-Pacific zone located in Tokyo in Japan, and a launch complex in Kourou, French Guiana, with a unique geographical position close to the equator. Combined with the extremely accurate orbit injection of Ariane, this equatorial position extends the life of the satellites. Constantly adjusting to changes in international market demand, Ariane Space provides customers with a complete, personalized range of launch services based on extensive experience and a highly reliable vehicle which can place payloads of up to 4.8 metric tons with Ariane 4 and in the near future 7 tons with Ariane 5 directly into orbit. Ariane Space is engaged in a long-term production program with its European space industry partners. The manufacturing, which follows a tight quality policy, is permanently aimed at meeting customer requirements worldwide. "12,000 highly qualified Europeans are engaged in this manufacturing activity. The success of this venture is largely due to the power and cohesion of the industrial partners involved. The principal contractors are Aerospatiale, SEP, DASA, the Fiat Group, Matra Marconi Space, CASA, Oerlikon Contraves. The various launcher sub-assemblies are built in Europe and taken by sea, air and land to the Kourou spaceport.
19 minutes and 30 seconds to go. We mentioned the Ariane mission directors. Are they the people with the final say to launch or not?
Not really. We are preparing the decision for Mr. Jean-Marie Luton that you see right now on the screen. This is our president. He is a so-called flight director. The mission director has to conduct the campaign and the countdown, and in a nominal situation there is a kind of no decision. The decision is only to go. Mr. Luton will be involved just in a situation where we should have problems.
We see, and we've mentioned leading figures, but obviously there is several hundred people in the sidelines who've been helping with this launch.
Yes, the actual launch team at the pad is about 150 people, and here we have, let's say, 30.
Here now we see some pictures from the launcher campaign. The launcher arrived here on the 15th of January. A few days later it was withdrawn from its crate. The first stage was the first to be erected vertically. Its 4 engines still clad with their protective shrouds. The second stage was next to be hoisted. All these operations taking place in the Ariane 4 assembly building located about a kilometer from the pad. Close-up shot there of the nozzle of the Viking engine of the second stage. The last stage to be hoisted was the cryotechnic H10 stage with a very different appearance, Remy.
Yes, this third stage is a cryotechnic one. That means the tanks have thermal protection, and the thrust frame is protected from shocks because it is made of carbon fiber.
Thermal protection because of the very cold cryogenic fuels, liquid oxygen and hydrogen.
Yes, and now we see the vehicle equipment bay being hoisted at the top of the vehicle.
And it was placed around the bulkhead of the third stage reservoir.
Maybe we can mention that this vehicle equipment bay is also built by Matra Marconi Space.
After our preceding launch was over, the table with the launcher was brought forward to the launch pad. There it was fixed to the pad, and the cryotechnic arms which fuel the third stage were brought forward. Here we see them. And then the service gantry was brought forward so as to protect the remaining operations.
Then you see here the fitting of the solid strap-on boosters. These 2 boosters are fitted at the pad just for safety reasons.
Ariane now in the darkness, lit up by the projectors. 16 minutes and 45 seconds to go. We see all the umbilical lines and those cryotechnic arms that are still topping up the third stage, which has been fueled these last few hours.
Yes, the fueling of the third stage begins at -3 hours and 40 minutes and will be interrupted just 5 minutes before liftoff. And here you have the status panels with everything green, including the Meteo.
And Hotbird.
And Hotbird.
Which is being monitored right up until launch. Here we see Jean-Jacques Duménil.
Jean-Jacques Duménil is the head of the Hotbird mission here. We call that the DMS, the mission director for Hotbird. And beside him is Monsieur Maton from Eutelsat organization.
Let's now have a presentation of Hotbird and their 13 degrees prime location.
Hotbird 4, the new star from Eutelsat at 13 degrees east. Eutelsat, Europe's first satellite operator, is launching Hotbird 4, a new entertainment, television and radio satellite for 13 degrees east. Built by Matra Marconi Space, Hotbird 4's 20 high-power transponders will soon be beaming digital and analog television and radio channels, as well as multimedia services throughout Europe and beyond. Eutelsat's newest satellite is the 5th to be positioned at the organization's 13 degrees east position in geostationary orbit. It joins Hotbirds 1, 2 and 3 and Eutelsat 2F1, which already broadcast over 200 channels to more than 65 million satellite television homes, equipped for direct-to-home reception or connected to a cable or community network. For broadcasters, Hotbird 4 offers full technical and operational flexibility. They can transmit in analog or digital format and can add exciting new multimedia services within the same transponder. They can also select one of 3 coverages: a wide beam, which stretches from the Atlantic Islands to the Gulf, a super beam, which reaches throughout Central and Western Europe as far as the Canary Islands, and a steerable beam that can be focused anywhere on the Earth, visible from 13 degrees east. And with Hotbird 4, Eutelsat introduces Skyplex, the world's first on-board multiplexing facility. Following close behind Hotbird 4 is Hotbird 5, which will rendezvous at 13 degrees east later this year to replace Eutelsat 2F1. Together, they will deliver high-speed internet access throughout Europe and beyond. And of course, 13 degrees east is also about satellite television. Cinema, sport, music, news and documentaries, interactive entertainment, and much, much more. But today, the spotlight is on Hotbird 4, a new star for Europe and a powerful contribution to the entertainment revolution.
During this little film, Hotbird made a very important operation. They have begun to switch from the external power supply to the onboard batteries. This operation will last about 10 minutes.
On screen now we see Bård Eilertsen. He is the Ariane Space payload manager for this client. And beside him, Mr. Jean Grenier, the Director General of Eutelsat. Today's Hotbird 4 satellite is the 12th satellite entrusted to Ariane Space out of a total of 15 contracts.
Again, Mr. Jean Grenier, Director General of Eutelsat.
You'll be listening in to the next weather report at the -10, but
yes, at -10 minutes we have the last meteor report, which is only made for the liftoff conditions.
We recapped on the launcher campaign. Now let's see what happened for the satellite since it arrived in French Guiana. That arrival was on the 29th of January. It arrived in a gigantic Antonov 124 freighter, a Russian aircraft with a very, very big hold, but it was a tight fit for the container, 7.5 meters long, 4.5 high. Only several centimeters clearance, very delicate handling operations, getting in and out. Here the satellite is being revealed. It comes in one entire piece, as you see. Its reflectors, 2.5 meter big reflectors, its solar panels, all are fixed in place. This shortens the preparation time in Kourou.
Yes, and they have just here to prepare the satellite, the thermal protections, do some electrical tests, and fill the spacecraft with propellants.
And that was on the 2nd of February. The satellite was placed in a special protective container and taken to the fueling building.
Yes, this operation is considered as hazardous, so the operators are in escape suite.
1.5 tons of fuel needed for the 12 years, possibly 14 years in orbit of the satellite and its early orbit phase.
And here begin the combined operations with the vehicle parts. That means we'll close the fairing, the two shelves of the fairing around the spacecraft. This is 9 days before liftoff.
And we get what we call here the composite, the payload and the upper part of the launcher. This composite could then be taken in a night journey for thermal reasons again.
Yes, this is always done in the evening to avoid the bright sun.
Hoisted to the top of the service gantry, to the summit of our launcher.
This operation is done at 5 days before liftoff, and the final assembly takes place at D-4 in the morning.
And we see several times a sort of hose-light structure coming out of the fairing. What is that?
Yes, this is a flushing with dry and clean air.
Right until liftoff, we're taking care of our precious cargo. All the status panels still green. We're 10 minutes away from launch. You listen in to the weather forecast, Rémi, while I recount a small anecdote that shows how future clients of Eutelsat have been gearing up to the use of Hotbird 4. I was looking on my satellite dish at the orbital position, which is next to 13, 16 degrees, and there I saw a test card, and I don't understand a word of Hungarian, but they were obviously announcing their arrival on Hotbird 4 well before the satellite was placed in orbit. Nine minutes and counting. Back here in the launch control building. Teams watching all their screens, their data coming in, preparing for a sequence that will start at the -6 minute mark, which is called the synchronized sequence. It's the automatic launch sequence. Have you a few details on the Meteo, Rémi, that you can tell us about?
Yes, I was just listening in the Didio's communication loop, and all the criteria for the liftoff are green.
Now, the situation has changed dramatically since last launch, 4th of February. We had a lot of trouble with upper altitude winds.
Yes, this problem is gone. Today we don't have any problems, nor with wind speed, lightning risk, and so on. Now the next step is the automatic launch sequence.
Let's now have a few more details about the vehicle equipment bay.
The purpose of the vehicle equipment bay is to monitor the launcher during the entire flight. The bay carries the guidance system, the avionics, the flight sequences, and the transmission of the telemetry data to the ground tracking stations. The flight termination equipment used in case of an anomaly is also located in the vehicle equipment bay. The vehicle equipment bay is activated during the entire flight. It is made of a support ring carrying the electronic equipment and the conical-shaped frames used for the integration with the upper part of the launcher. This is the onboard computer loaded with the flight software. This equipment monitors the flight sequence, the guidance, the navigation, and the separation of the stages. It processes the input data from the guidance system and sends commands to the interface unit located here. This unit routes the commands to other equipment like the power command unit located here. From here the commands are routed to the valves, to the pyrotechnic separation devices of the boosters, stages, fairing, and finally the payload. The vehicle equipment bay carries also a complete telemetry unit, processing all the inputs coming from the transducers on the launcher. The complete telemetry signal is transmitted to the ground stations to give real-time information during the flight.
So many functions to that vehicle equipment bay, we can really say we have a very intelligent launcher which is going to guide itself up to the final destination.
Yes, since the vehicle is flying, we have no possibility to do anything. It flies autonomously, completely.
Minus 25 seconds, 20 seconds before the minus 6 minute mark to be announced by Julio Montréal.
Tour de DDO, attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée.
So from now on, the entire flight preparation sequence will be done automatically.
Début de séquence synchronisée.
Right now.
Announced now this automatic launch sequence. Why do we change mode from a manual operation to an automatic sequence?
Yes, because the status of the vehicle will change from a safe status to a lift-off status. And we have a lot of operations to do during this short period, electrical operations and fluid operations, and these operations will be done by two computers with a cross-checking between themselves.
And there are a very great number of operations in a short lapse of time.
Yes. Monsieur Luton, our president on screen.
Can we detail what is involved to run this automatic sequence?
Yes, the sequences are engaged manually by the operators, but after that everything runs automatically. For example, within 10 seconds from now we'll stop the topping off of the third stage and close all the valves. And a little bit later in the sequence, at minus 3 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll put the flight pressure on the hydrogen tank. At minus 2 minutes and 15 seconds on the oxygen tank, and after that we have only electrical operations to conduct.
Now, what should happen if there is an anomaly during this synchronized sequence?
Any anomaly leads to a red, of course, and brings the vehicle in a safe position and sets the clock back at minus 6 minutes and waits.
Right, we were talking about our vehicle equipment bay. There is an onboard computer. There is a flight program. Has the flight program been loaded on board?
Yes, the flight software is loaded about 1 hour before liftoff, but now the liftoff time is loaded in a computer.
5.5 hours ago, the gantry, the service tower that has been sheltering Ariane, was pulled back from the pad. This was the first time that everybody could see the launcher complete with its composite, its payload at the top, its fairing. It's a very, very large metallic structure.
Yes, this structure is theoretically 4,000 tons in weight, but we don't know exactly because we have modified it several times.
3 minutes and 40 seconds and counting, all the status panels still green. What is happening now at this mark?
Minus 3 minutes 30 seconds. This is now the flight pressure on the hydrogen tank. And this lasts a few seconds, and normally the spacecraft should be on internal power. Again, Mr. Jean Grenier on screen, the president of Eutelsat, and Bart Eilertsen.
When you're with your colleagues in such a situation, do you just sit back and watch?
Well, we are concentrated, of course, but we do nothing. As a matter of fact, we just wait the time ticking away.
But you have to be very, very alert in order to react immediately.
If everything remains green, we have nothing to do. But if something went red, we have a lot of operations and communications to do.
2 minutes and 45 seconds. Everything seems go for the launch of Hotbird 4. All those umbilical lines that link up the umbilical tower to the launcher, they will fall back when the launcher...
Yes, they are just pulled back due to the liftoff, actually. Now, within a few seconds, we'll engage the last fluid operation on the vehicle. This is right now. We put the flight pressure on the oxygen tank on the third stage. The first and second stages have been prepared before. And from now on, we have only electrical operations to do on the vehicle. And at the very last moment, of course, open the main feeding valves to ignite the engines.
Here we see a shot of the cryotechnic arms, those fuel lines that have been feeding the third stage and ensuring that it's fully topped up. Oxygen on the left, hydrogen on the right. A split shot with two cameras.
These arms will be removed at minus 5 seconds from liftoff.
1 minute and 30 approaching. Certain tension that rises as we approach the 1 minute mark, which will be announced by the launch range manager.
À tour de DDO, attention pour moi, 1 minute. Top moins 1 minute et décompte.
So now everything will go very quick. The vehicle will be switched on its own board batteries. The actuators of the nozzles will be activated from now. And the final sequence starts at minus 9 seconds with what we call the automatic liftoff sequence. That means all the navigation systems will be brought on flight mode.
Right, if you've just joined us, you're in time to watch the launch of Flight 106 with Hotbird 4, bound for the orbital location of 13 degrees east. Let's listen back to the final count from Julio Montréal. We'll be back once we're off the ground.
À tour de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage. Décollage. Lift-off. Contrôle de vol normal. Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
All parameters are normal, says the launch range manager as she climbs 20 seconds into flight.
Pilotage calme.
The combined thrust of the 4 Viking engines and the 2 solid propellant boosters.
Extension des papes.
There we have shutdown of the solid boosters, which will be kept attached to the launcher some time.
Yes, because we have 2 reasons. The first reason is
Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
the maximum dynamic pressure that we have to fly, and the second reason is to avoid to drop them too early, so they don't hit our facilities.
1 minute into flight, and here, even in our commentary box, we can hear the launcher not far off, heading out over the Atlantic Ocean. Clearly visible, the Viking engines pushing strong.
Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
All parameters are normal.
Contrôle des vols normaux.
Flight control as well.
Now all this information comes from the telemetry station located at the Montagne des
Pilotage calme.
kilometers out of Kourou.
We're having an optical view here of the launcher.
Apparently the sky
Séparation
is
des
very
pales.
clear.
I saw those two little streams. Those were the solid propellant boosters being jettisoned.
Passage des pressions maximales dynamiques.
Now the launcher reached a sound speed. This is what we call maximum dynamic pressure.
And on screen we have
Pilotage normal.
a visualization of the flight trajectory, the nominal one, and on the right-hand side, certain figures that we'll be watching very closely as we ascend.
Trajectoire normale. Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
Just a few words about that. We are now 135 seconds in flight. This is the inertial guidance system backup, which is giving the information.
Paramètres de propulsion
Altitude
normale.
is right now 29.2 kilometers and the speed 0.8 kilometers a second.
La
And
trajectoire est normale.
the telemetry from the launcher is being beamed down to stations here in French Guiana.
Yes, the oldest telemetry comes down to our station,
Pilotage
which is
normal.
called Montagne des Pères. And as soon as the visibility
Trajectoire
is
normale.
over Natal will take over in Brazil, and then later on in
Propulsion
flight
normal.
on the Ascension Island, and finally in Libreville in Africa, and at the end of the flight in Malindi,
Contrôle des
on
vols
the east
normal.
coast of Africa.
Altitude already 51 kilometers, our velocity 1.6 kilometers a second. We'll be aiming the final injection velocity at
Oh, this speed will be reached by the third stage at the
Tous
end
les
of the
paramètres à
flight.
bord sont normaux.
all parameters are normal. Coming up
Extension
to
premier étage.
Now the first stage has burned out
Allumage deuxième étage.
and separated, and the second stage begins his job.
this second stage is consuming its storeable propellants
Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
at a rate of 1 ton a second. Is that it?
Yes, that's it, exactly that. And the shutdown of this engine will be done by delta speed. That means we do not go to fuel
Trajectoire
depletion.
normale.
Our mass now, with its second stage,
Propulsion
has a
normal.
mass only of 56 tons, down from those 326 when we were on the pad. Very sharp drop in the mass of the launcher, coming up to the separation of the fairing.
Largage de la coiffe.
There, confirmation that the fairing has been jettisoned, 114 kilometers
Tous les
altitude.
paramètres à bord sont normaux. La trajectoire est normale.
As soon as we are out of the atmosphere, there's no need for a fairing, though the fairing has been jettisoned.
And this weight loss is an advantage to lose, what, 700 kilos or so?
Something like that. This saves, of course, payload mass.
Right, we'll have a series of tracking stations covering the flight
Contrôle des vols normal.
right up until injection and separation. After those stations in French Guiana, we'll be having coverage from Natal.
Yes, in a few minutes we'll have
Paramètres de
Natal on
propulsion
track
normaux.
within about 80 seconds. But before that, we'll have the second stage
Tous les paramètres à bord sont
engine
normaux. La
main
trajectoire
thrust
est normale.
cut off.
And here, is it a shutdown or a burnout?
This is a shutdown guided by delta speed. We don't go to fuel depletion, never.
Extension deuxième étage.
Now we have confirmation of depletion of burnout of the second stage
Séparation
and
deuxième,
separation.
troisième étage.
Right, the third stage.
Allumage troisième étage. Propulsion normale.
Ignition of the third stage. 4.6 kilometers a second, 182 kilometers altitude.
Contrôle des vols normal.
We have another two lines there on the right-hand side of the
Propulsion
screen. T is the time of flight, of course. Moyen, CIS, what does that mean?
Centrale inertiale de secours. This means this is the backup guidance system. The nominal guidance system, of course, is leading the engine, and
Paramètre de
the
propulsion
second one
normand.
gives the information.
And CIS?
This is the second inertial guidance system.
Sorry.
A is altitude, of course. We have 214 kilometers, speed nearly 5 kilometers a second.
Right, during this third stage propulsion,
Acquisition par la station de Natal au Brésil.
So now we have the Natal telemetry station on track. So the data flow goes now to Natal and is transmitted to Kourou later on.
time now during the third stage propulsion to evoke a few subjects. First of all, about Eutelsat. It's my fourth Eutelsat commentary. Very often when you have important clients such as Eutelsat, we're bound to come back to them. The last flight was Hotbird 3 in September. Assisted then for this commentary by Bård Eilertsen, who's down there in the control room. After Hotbird 4, Ariane Space will be launching later this year a further 2 satellites for Eutelsat. So it's really what one calls a truly faithful client. Relationship, I've heard it described, I think Mr. Jean Grenier recognizes it as a passionate relationship between his organization and Ariane Space, but also which is based on sound, good business sense, no doubt. And this relationship goes back some 15 years. Ever since the first Eutelsat was launched, that was also called ECS-1. It was launched on Ariane's 6th mission back in June 1983. It had been developed for Eutelsat by the European Space Agency, and it heralded a new epoch in European satellite telecommunications. And it's interesting to note that this first ever Eutelsat was placed at the prime orbital position of 13 degrees east. Check on the figures. Still good?
Yes, all the flight parameters are nominal. We have reached an altitude of 267 kilometers. Speed is now 5.1 kilometers a second. And in a few moments, the Kourou tracking station will lose the vehicle. Since the vehicle is now sending his telemetry to Natal, we don't need anymore the Kourou tracking station.
Ariane Space once again serving European satellite telecommunications, and to give an illustration of how important its contribution has been, we can say that when we add all the clients included, the number of satellite transponders, 80% of those satellite transponders in service over the European continent were orbited by the European launcher. Or if you want another comparison in terms of satellites, that's 28 telecom craft out of 34 were launched from Kourou. 5.3 kilometers a second, 280. We're nearing the culmination point, I believe.
Yes, in a few seconds we'll reach a culmination point, say the culmination point of the powered phase of the flight. And then the third stage will go back a little bit near to the Earth to win some speed.
Using the gravity of the Earth's attraction. Time now for our regular spot on our company news, a company that received in Washington on February the 18th last the Industry Innovator of the Year Award, a distinction attributed to Ariane Space by the Society of Satellite Professionals International, SSPI for short, and that for, I quote the organization's General Secretary, the spectacular success of a commercial launch system which has placed over 141 satellites into orbit. On the order book front now, since our last launch, Ariane Space has been entrusted Stentor. Stentor is France's new telecommunications technology demonstration satellite. A contract signed by Monsieur Brachet, the Director General of CNES, and Monsieur Luton, signed in Paris not so long ago. The launch will be carried out by an Ariane 5 in the second quarter of the year 2000. Stentor will be built jointly by Matra-Marconi Space, once again Matra-Marconi Space, also Aérospatiale Espace et Défense and Alcatel Espace. The use of this craft, it'll be to demonstrate new spaceborne technologies, telecommunication
Trajectoire normale, tous les
technologies.
paramètres à bord sont normaux.
It'll weigh approximately 2,000 kilos at liftoff, and it'll prove new technologies such as active antennas, lithium-ion batteries, advanced thermal control, and
Fin des
electric or
poursuites
ionic
normales par les
propulsion.
moyens des cours.
So now the Kourou tracking station lost the vehicle. This is normal. Now all the telemetry goes only to Natal. And within a few seconds, let's say 1 minute about, we'll have the Ascension Island on track.
With this Stentor contract, the number of satellites now on the Ariane Space order book is 42 satellites to be launched, 41 after this mission is over. A final little snippet from the Ariane Space news page. The community of Ariane
Contrôle des vols
Towns.
normal, trajectoire normale.
The community of Ariane Towns has grown with several new members created at Le Bourget last June. This association groups together all towns involved in the Ariane programs. It started out with founding partners Courcouronnes and Évry and Kourou. And to these we must now add Bremen in Germany, Charleroi in Belgium, Colleferro and Turin in Italy, Les Mureaux and Vernon in France. No doubt others will follow. And a very good evening to everyone watching our video transmission in these towns. Our program being beamed to you, you've guessed it, by Hotbird. The Hotbird's already in orbit, of course.
Trajectoire normale.
Trajectory is normal. Everything seems good to you, Rémi?
Yes, all the flight parameters are normal. The telemetry data that we have and that we have processed, shown here as a resume, say that everything is going very
Propulsion est
smoothly.
stable, tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
An interesting thing, people often wonder whether there is any contact with the satellite itself during the ascension.
Well, the satellite telemetry is just on and on a standby mode.
Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
Our tracking station, well, the Eutelsat's tracking station, which is the first seeing the satellite in terms of telemetry, is in South Africa, in Hartbeespoort. This is just a few
Trajectoire
minutes
normale.
after separation,
Tous les
and
paramètres
then
sont
later, about half an hour later, this is the telemetry of the spacecraft will be beamed down to Canberra in Australia.
Acquisition par la station d'Ascension.
Now we have Ascension Island on track. The vehicle is right now in the middle of the Atlantic.
A few words now, supplementary words about this new highly original system on Hotbird 4, the system called Skyplex, which was mentioned in the Eutelsat film. It may be the third in a series of satellites, but it is a totally new system, a world first. It's been developed by Italy's Alenia Aerospazio together with MMS and Alcatel Espacio. Skyplex is the fruit of a European Space Agency research program called ARTEST into advanced telecommunications system. Now, the Skyplex system
Trajectoire normale.
may sound complicated, but in fact, it allows broadcasters at widely separated locations to individually uplink their video or multimedia signals to the satellite, and it's on board the satellite that these signals will be multiplexed, processed and multiplexed, and then sent back in one signal to the digital decoders that are in everybody's home. This is a considerable step forward. All this conforming to the norms, the standards, the MPEG-2 norms, the DVB standards. Hotbird 4 is carrying one Skyplex unit. Hotbird 5 will be carrying 3 units to generalize this system.
Trajectoire normale, tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
All parameters are still normal.
Yes, in the meantime, the speed is 7.3 kilometers a second,
Contrôle des vols normal.
and all the flight parameters are nominal. Now, within a few seconds, the Natal tracking station will lose the vehicle. And then we'll have the station of
Fin de
Libreville.
poursuite normale par la station de Natal.
Here is a confirmation. Natal is out of sight of the vehicle. And then we will have, within 1 minute, the station of Libreville in the west coast of Africa
Trajectoire normale.
with the telemetry.
And there is constant overlap in the coverage of these downrange
Yes,
stations.
maybe we forgot to mention that. We have systematically
paramètres
an
à bord sont
overlapping
normaux.
of all the stations.
Never out of sight, our payload.
Never.
Another active partner in this mission who'll be taking charge of the satellite immediately after separation. Very often we forget that the satellite's life just starts when it's separated from Ariane, but there is what we call the early orbit phase. Now, can you explain why we need to take charge of the satellite at one point in orbit and lead it to another point?
Yes, first of all, maybe we go back to the last moment before separation. After the shutdown of the third stage engine, we have to orientate the spacecraft according to very precise specification given by Hotbird. Then we separate the Hotbird spacecraft, and then finally we have a very important maneuver to do with the third stage to avoid any collision between the spacecraft and the third stage. And then basically the Ariane mission is at its end. Then begins the life of the satellite. This is very important because during all this phase, the power supply of the satellite is done by his own batteries. So as soon as possible, he has to deploy or partially deploy his solar panels. And the commands to do that will be sent by the Canberra tracking station by the Hotbird teams.
Right, now the people who are in charge of this early orbit phase, Eutelsat has entrusted CNES, the French space agency, with the job of getting Hotbird 4 to its final destination. There are several CNES teams from its operations directorate in Toulouse, France. They'll be at work. They work in close collaboration with Eutelsat and the satellite manufacturer. They use a worldwide network of tracking and telecommand stations. They'll be latching onto the satellite very shortly after separation, using a station in South Africa. They'll be computing its precise orbit, checking out the craft, ordering the partial deployment of its reflectors, and preparing for the first firing of the satellite's apogee boost motor that will get it in several boosts to the geostationary arc, its geostationary position. This is the 22nd early orbit phase contract being carried out by CNES teams in Toulouse. And they have another 5 satellites on order to attend to this year. 9.1 kilometers per second
velocity. Velocity 9.1 kilometers a second, and within 2 minutes we'll have the third stage burnout. We should say shut down, because this is not the fuel depletion, of course.
Because we also leave the ground with a certain reserve, a certain margin, in order to be able to be absolutely sure getting to the injection point.
Yes, we have to guarantee to our customers that the chances of non-depletion of the third stage is more than 99%.
30 seconds de propulsion.
Another 30 seconds of propulsion, says Julio Montreal. Monsieur Luton quite obviously confident. Monsieur Grenier still watching attentively.
Acquisition pour la station de Libreville.
Now the Libreville tracking station has the telemetry from the vehicle, and we have reached the first
extension 3e étage.
And here's the confirmation of the shutdown of the third stage. Now everything is in orbit.
We have a mass now. What's left?
Début d'orientation du composite charge-t-il.
Practically empty third stage, the vehicle equipment bay, and stacked above the passenger, combined mass of just under 5 metric tons.
So now the attitude control system of the third stage will orientate and spin up the composite.
This is like a little orbital ballet before the separation of the satellite.
Yes, this will last about, 30 seconds.
Can we look forward to the moment of separation? How is the satellite attached to its adapter?
The satellite is attached with a clamp band and is separated by just a few springs.
Fin de manœuvre d'orientation du composite charge-t-il.
So now the attitude control system says that the satellite is in the right position.
The moment we've been waiting for, closely approaching.
Yes, the last phase is to spin up the satellite.
Fin de poursuite normale par la station d'ascension.
20 minutes into flight, 22 seconds.
So within a few seconds we should separate Hotbird.
Séparation Hotbird 4, je crois qu'on peut dire olé.
There we are. Here it is. Separation is confirmed. Hotbird is a new star now.
And Julio Montreal said after the announcement, I think we can say holle. Thank you, Julio. Right, relief, satisfaction, obviously, Monsieur Luton, there, having served his very faithful customer once again. Monsieur Grenier now has another craft in his constellation very soon. I think the early orbit phase maneuvers, the drift to the 13 degrees orbital location will take about a month or so. That includes the testing of the satellite, the in-orbit testing, before the satellite joins the fleet of its sister craft, the Hotbird fleet. And suddenly on our screens, our home television sets, via our dish antennas, will be receiving a whole set of new programs from France. I believe France TPS Bouquet is having extra programs, Telepew, Rai, Hungarian television stations in digital and analog mode. A replay of the launch coming up. How soon do we start preparing for the next launch, Rémi?
Well, the
Acquisition par la
vehicle
station de
has
Malindi.
been integrated in his assembly dock, and within 6 days from now, we'll push it forward to the launch complex. There's now apparently the replay
The launch
of the
replay coming up.
the liftoff replay, ignition of the first stage.
I see the box of ceremonial cigars being handed around there. In one of the seats there, closest to us on the left, I believe it is Monsieur Courtois, Deputy Director General of CNES, an old hand in this business.
Allumage,
Now again, the liftoff of
décollage,
the vehicle.
lift-off. Fin de mission lanceur. Contrôle de vol normal. Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
Monsieur Grenier, beside Jean-Jacques Duménil, looking at the orbital parameter, perhaps, that are already
Well,
coming
I
in?
don't think so. This is a little bit too early, but I think they are they are linked to the South African station and are probably waiting for the information that they have telemetry. Because the telemetry is processed, and within about, let's say, 20 minutes from now, we have here, physically here, all the orbital parameters.
We've had the occasion several times to mention the prime contractor, Matra Marconi Space, its satellite for Eutelsat, Matra Marconi Space, which with this satellite was orbiting its 30th satellite on the Ariane launcher. It's with 30 satellites launched by Ariane, the second client in terms of satellites. And with this Hotbird 4, it has reached the 50 tons in orbit of Matra satellites that have been orbited. Where does the tradition of the cigar come from, Rémi? Do you know?
Yes, this is as old as the space business. I think at the very beginning it was done.
3, 2, 1, top.
It's another replay.
Allumage. Décollage, lift-off. Contrôle de vol normal. paramètres de propulsion normaux.
Still poring over the console there, watching for his all-important signal of acquisition that the satellite is in good health. As concerns the launcher, you'll just check on the situation then, Rémi?
Oui, j'y suis. Si, tu m'entends pas là? Tu m'entends pas?
Talking about cigars, you say it's an old tradition. I remember seeing a launch of another vehicle lifting off somewhere else in the world, and immediately after that launch, the cigars coming out. So obviously it's something that in the launch space business is a widely accepted tradition.
Well, as I was some years younger, I always remember Gene Kranz after Apollo 13 with his huge cigar.
One aspect of the flight that we could mention whilst we wait for the post-flight speeches is the fact that the launcher telemetry that has been received throughout this mission, received back by the tracking stations, is analyzed fairly quickly, rapidly. It is directed to Toulouse Operations Directorate, and then there's a first analysis which is then forwarded to Ariane Space Headquarters in Évry to be absolutely sure on the perfect functioning of the launcher so that the next flight we can launch in full confidence.
Yes, and in the meantime, I just got the information that the telemetry coming from the spacecraft is in good shape. The spacecraft survived very good. And the Toulouse station has got all the data coming from the downrange tracking stations.
How do you feel as a mission director at this point? Is it a relief? What do you feel when you have accomplished such a mission?
Well, we think that we have done our job as good as possible. First of all, it depends, of course, of the complete campaign, because finally the countdown is only one operation in a campaign. But usually, if we had...
Director General, nonetheless, a good friend. We've known each other for a long time now. It is a great pleasure for me to announce this second success of the year for Ariane, thanks to this mission you entrusted to us. The mission was perfect throughout, and I think that what has happened is indicative of the trust you have placed in us. It is the second launch for an extremely prestigious operator, the 12th rather, in the total of 15 that we have in the order book. Thanks to this success, we have some 80% of the operational transponders in Europe that have been placed in the trust of Ariane, largely thanks to Eutelsat. It's also the 34th success in a row as regards the Ariane launches, and I think this goes to show as well that at all costs we are concentrating on the best possible quality of our operations to satisfy our customers. Now, as I say, I've known Jean Grenier for many years now, but I would like to take the opportunity today to say that Eutelsat is a great organization that has contributed to the survival of the space industry in Europe, but it's also true of Ariane. Perhaps it was true before you came to Eutelsat and you continued this. And it's largely thanks to you that we, even before the launch of Ariane, managed to have orders placed in the case of Eutelsat. And without such successes, we probably wouldn't have had such a rosy future. Thank you once again, and I wish you, Eutelsat and Hotbird 4, all the best. Hotbird 4 is embarking upon its life, and I say to Matra, all the best as well, as the manufacturer of the satellite. I think that in all cases we've successfully carried out our respective missions. I'd like to thank those from the Guyana Space Center who've been involved, the industrial teams, whether we're talking about Ariane Space, or people who work on the launch pad, or those working back in Europe who've been involved in the development of the launch vehicle. And I'd like to congratulate everybody, because it's always a difficult task, but really we managed to do everything on time. And thank you, Mr. Mignot, for having allowed us to get this going on time. Let me say that I'm particularly happy that this launch occurred today, as we have with us the former French Prime Minister, the very one, in fact, who allowed us to go ahead with Ariane. I'm talking about Pierre Messmer, who was Prime Minister in 1973, the head of government at the time. And it was he who embarked upon the necessary negotiations and allowed the decision to be taken to carry out the Ariane program back in 1973. I'm sure he's listening to me. I think he's at the Toucan site, and he's been watching the launch from there. So I would like to dedicate this launch to him. Thank you. And now it is my turn to say a few words. I can only state the obvious, really. I'm very satisfied. I'm very satisfied because there's always a build-up of tension prior to such events, despite the tremendous trust I place in Ariane Space. There were a few tense moments. We had to wait to make sure that the satellite really exists. And now we know this is the case. We've checked acquisition from South Africa, so that's the first stage we've gone through. I would like to congratulate you for the control over the launch. It was exactly on time. The parameters were as near perfect as possible. And I would indeed like to congratulate all of those who have been behind this success. As a client, of course, we always have to be difficult in dealings with our suppliers. But when it comes to thanking them and congratulating them, then we should do so as well. And it is a great pleasure for me to express these thanks and congratulations on behalf of all of my colleagues who have been following this event very closely with me. Everybody has been most interested in it. I'd like to thank Jean-Marie Luton. It is true, we've known each other for a long time now. Now, in our professional lives, I should actually say that we've never had an argument. Yet. We have often met, shall we say, on opposite sides of the fence. I was always on the in the role of the difficult customer, shall we say. And I'm sure that these good relations, personal and professional, will continue. We've still got a lot of work to do. There are another 3 launches this year. I hope there'll be more after that as well. And I hope that we will be able to continue to place our trust in Ariane Space. Congratulations and thank you very much. Before closing this retransmission, I'd like to say that for the next launch, it is scheduled for the 20th of March. Spot is the satellite that will be launched. It's Spot 4. And I hope that on that occasion we will share the same success that we've seen today. Thank you.
Décollage, lift-off. Contrôle de vol normal. Paramètres de propulsion normaux.
And with that, we bring to a close our Ariane Space video transmission for this flight 106, successfully completed for the count of a very faithful client, as was said in the speeches between Monsieur Luton and Monsieur Grenier. Monsieur Grenier, who was joking about his satellites to be launched in the forthcoming months, saying that he had so many launches, including his own, because Monsieur Jean Grenier will shortly be taking his retirement. But his launch will surely be a less costly one than a normal satellite launch. We'll be back with you, as Monsieur Luton announced, on the 20th of March for the launch of Spot 4, France's fourth Earth observation satellite, another satellite coming from the stables of Matra Marconi Space. With that, good night from us.
Good night, everybody.